All right, and here's one last problem. As other options of other policies to talk about, like health care, as those things get basically closed off to Republicans for these last 5 days, as we head toward Election Day, as the president doubles and triples and quadruples down on this hard shove to make this election all about terrible immigrants and race and the border, there is another problem for Republican candidates right now. And we're going to speak in just a moment with a well-connected military reporter from Newsweek magazine about the military deployment, the active duty troop deployment that just started today, which Trump ordered to the U.S. border in response to that caravan of Central American migrants he's trying to make so terrifying, that he's tried to make the centerpiece of the election. The caravan is more than 800 miles away from the nearest place they could cross the U.S. border if they got there. They're more than 2,000 miles away from the place they're considered most likely to try to reach the border if they try to. But the president announced this week that there would be initially 5,000 active duty U.S. troops rushed to the border in response to the threat of this caravan. Then it became 9,000 troops. Now apparently they're saying it is 15,000 troops. 15,000 active duty U.S. servicemen and women. Democrats in the Armed Services Committees in both the House and Senate have now written letters to the White House asking about what's the cost of this deployment, how long is this thing going to last? And of course, we are all used to not just increased demagoguery, but also blatant political stunts before Election Day. I know that. It is something different. It is a different order of magnitude when you're talking about thousands of active duty U.S. soldiers. More U.S. soldiers than are serving right now in the war in Afghanistan. If 15,000 active duty U.S. troops at, rounded up to infinite cost, if they're being taken away from other U.S. military missions and instead sent in a huge deployment right before the election to the border, specifically to help the president's party win the election because the president thinks that's good messaging, that's not your run-of-the-mill stunt. That's something that might even annoy the military itself. And so here's the last point. 2 military sources have gone to the press and have provided to Newsweek magazine actual military planning documents for Trump's pre-election border deployment. These documents, just published by Newsweek magazine, show the unvarnished internal military assessment that was not supposed to be made public about what exactly the military believes it is being sent to the border to confront. These documents obtained by Newsweek magazine, there's a lot here. We're going to talk to the reporter from this story in just a moment. But here's the reason they were leaked in the first place. This is the military intelligence assessment of the threat that the president is hyping so much as justifying this deployment. This is what this document says. According to the military, in this internal document, quote, based on historic trends, it is assessed that only a small percentage of the migrants will likely reach the border. And then see over here, military documents love acronyms. Acronym here is MLCOA, most likely course of action, MLCOA. This is the most likely course of action, which is what the military itself assesses in terms of the supposed threat they're responding to with this deployment. Most likely course of action. Caravan dwindles as it nears U.S. Limited criminal exploitation and no terrorist infiltration. So this is a document that was not supposed to be released to the public. It's unclassified, but it's labeled for official use only and law enforcement sensitive. But it's now been leaked. And this shows us what the military thinks about this situation for which they're being sent in numbers larger than the Afghanistan war deployment to the border right ahead of the election on the president's orders. The reason this document is now public, well, we don't know because we can't get in the heads of the sources here, right? But it would seem to indicate that there may be people within the military who want it to be known that this deployment of U.S. troops to the border right before the election might just be for a political reason, to help the president's political party, and not for a real military reason. We're going to have more on this document with the reporter who broke this story next.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.